Imagine if men fucked windows like cardinals. That's
a note you have?
It's a note I have.
These are your deep thoughts that you just have to write down in a journal to ponder.
You know, I'm a bit of a philosopher.
It's very deep.
Been keeping a doc. It's a shared doc. I don't know that you've ever opened it.
No, I did notice it this morning. It's weird. I get a text when you're texting me. It's like, hey, she updated the podcast notes if you want to look at it.
In your texts?
Mm-hmm.
Crazy. I get like a notification in the ones that I share with people, but
so I went and looked and I was like, the update was, imagine if men fucked windows like cardinals. I was like, well, okay.
That's an old one. I was just editing it this morning and adding the nostalgia one. And I used to keep little notes like this to remind me what to talk about, like to write jokes. And sometimes I would go back and be able to write a joke on that premise. And other times I would be like, what was I going for here?
Yeah.
Like, what I maybe should have put a few more notes. It's like when you wake up in the middle of the night and you try to put the gist of your dream down so you don't forget it. And you wake up in the morning and it's like wallpaper toothpaste. And it's like, okay, cool. I think what I was thinking here is the world would be a safer place if more men just fucked windows like this cardinal. But that's still not very good.
I guess maybe yeah. What were you talking about? If men...
Well, because this cardinal is aggressively like trying to mate with itself. And I think we got a comment somewhere. We learned through ChatGPT or something that they're just kind of crazy trying to,
It's either territorial or they're trying to mate.
Yeah. And I don't know. At some point, I think I said it somewhere and made myself laugh. And now I'm making myself laugh for a different reason. But wouldn't the world be
maybe the metaphor is, something where humans are often, pulled towards another partner for illusory reasons, because that whole thing, it's like, it's an illusion, it's a reflection, and you think you're seeing a potential mate or a threat, and so you take action. So it's like when someone is, wooed by someone's looks, but they're actually a shitty person, that's the illusion mirror, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, well, that's really deep.
I'm grasping.
That's fucking deep. But I was thinking more like there are a lot of guys that
will fuck anything.
Treated me like a window, and I wish they would have just fucked a door or something. I wish they would have just fucked their pillow. So yeah, it definitely wasn't. It wasn't one of my more profound hypotheses. Another thing I realized when I was writing notes this morning was something's been really standing out to us. We've been kind of talking about is all of the nostalgia from the cross of planning going around. And when I did the acronym, is that what it's called? When I take the letters from the first.
I believe that's called an acronym.
Yeah, I feel pretty brain dead this morning. For cross of planning, it's COP.
Yeah, that's crazy.
What do you think that means? And the cross of sleeping phoenix is COSP.
COSP.
I'm just going to start saying that. COSP and COP. That won't be confusing. That is a lot of COP energy. Big COP energy in the cross of planning. It's I think the thing I don't really vibe with is the COP part. The way that everybody acts like a fucking cop.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. And then we'll get into that at some point. And then have you seen these articles going around? It's been going around for a couple of years, but that you take on the DNA as a woman, you take on the DNA of all the men you fucked.
Yeah, and it sticks around for like 15 years or something?
Yeah.
It's an astronomical amount of time.
Anyway, I noticed, maybe these aren't connected, but I have noticed in editing podcasts, I am talking more than I have been talking in a long time, and I am exhausted. But I've noticed I've been doing a lot of word transposing. And I don't know if I've always been doing a lot of word transposing or if that's maybe
my DNA.
Your DNA.
Sorry, babe.
Maybe you give me word transposing and I give you ADHD.
Yeah, I mean, I think the word transposing for me, it's coming from like my brain's moving too fast. I'm trying to get the thoughts out. And so I just gloss over sometimes like picking the right word or even knowing the full meaning of a word and trying to use it. And so I feel like if you're in a place, you have been really talkative lately, like even outside the podcast.
Yeah.
I notice that I wonder if that's just part of it. It's like you got a million thoughts coming through and then you're trying to get them all out. And so you accidentally transpose words.
Yeah, I feel like it would be funny if we could just get a video of just you trying to live your life and me just standing next to you, just talking. You like open a cabinet, I'm inside the cabinet, and I'm like, so then another thing I was thinking.
Totally. It's been like that a little bit lately. Or I'm like I'm coming to the kitchen for a moment, trying to get back to my thing, and then now we're talking about the existential complications of Cardinals fucking windows.
Well, I think we used to talk more than we do now.
Yeah.
Since we started a podcast, it seems like now we just we used to get up in the morning and spend hours unpacking things.
Yeah, have like coffee talk.
Yeah. And then I think you've just been kind of internal for months.
Yeah.
And I think Jupiter and Gemini is making me very chatty, maybe. I don't know. I feel like I have a lot to say. And yeah, so now I feel like I'm cornering you. Waterboarding you with my thoughts.
I hope this is just this Pluto Capricorn transit thing, because the internalness, I mean, I like it. I feel like I'm being productive, thinking about certain things, reflecting, but I'm also wanting to kind of isolate to be creative, but I'm not super productive in that. But the like annoyance with anything that's kind of impeding on that. Yeah. And it's not overwhelming. I mean, I love talking to you at random parts of the day. We just unpack something deeply for like an hour. But I do like, I kind of want to get back to what we were at a couple months ago, where it was like very free flowing. I was kind of inspired to do most anything and kind of just go with it. Now I'm like very reserved in what I'm wanting to spend my energy on. And it's like a little frustrating.
You know what? I bet that's what it is. Because we started this podcast in Pluto and Aquarius, and you were a little bit doing your own thing. Like you were really into those books. And so when you're downloading, but that's different, because at any point, if I just want to have communication, all I have to be is like, so what's that book saying? And then we're going to talk for 5 hours.
Yeah.
But it has been like when Pluto went back into Capricorn, it has that vibe of like when we first met, when you were used to like fighting for your private time, where you are like kind of like I can feel that kind of wall in the ether of your protectiveness. And then I watch you go like, she's not trying to take my fucking, like I watch it like harden for a second. And then there's a temptation for me, which we dealt with in the past, of like taking that personally or taking that as a sign that you don't like me anymore or whatever, internalizing that. But it's really funny how loud it is in the ether, just this moment where it's like, I'm like, hey, so anyway, I was thinking if you cross-reference these two things, and then you're like, you know, making a smoothie or something, and then you're literally like, I need to get back downstairs. I only came up here to drink something. And then you see you like soften and kind of calm down. And then you see me like read the room and then want to get kind of freaked out for a second and then calm down. And then I was thinking last night, like how much progress we've made, because back in the day when we first got together and you were used to having to fight or get excuses for your private time or whatever, you kind of brought that energy into the relationship. And I brought this like hypersensitivity to people being frustrated with me. And you were used to like frustration being your expression.
Right.
You know, and we don't have any of that. I don't want to jinx it. I feel like every time I'm like, it's over, it comes back. But that's something, the Pluto and Capricorn, that is like really kind of standing out to me, is how the more aware I become of things, the less my stories can take hold, because I can like really quickly now go like, okay, this actually doesn't have anything to do with me. bummer. He doesn't want to hang out, but he's just feeling really protective of his private time for whatever reason. So, and then at one point I did, before we had an Aries full moon, and I was like, this is a recipe for disaster. Like, just checking in. This is not our relationship coming in for a landing, right? And you're like, no, dumbass. And then I was like, okay, cool. And then I've been like, fine since, and I can like sit with the fact that I feel like younger versions of me or less healed versions of me ruined relationships because I'm attracted to people that do this thing that you do. I'm attracted to introverts. I'm attracted to the way that, like, I think to get the kind of mind that you have, it's someone who spends a lot of time alone. I like to spend a lot of time alone, so I like the freedom it provides me. But those stories would show up and go, well, I guess it's over. You can't beat me to the door because I'll catch the slightest shift. And I think I used to ruin things trying to beat people to the door.
Yeah, I can't count how many times early on in the relationship you went and rented a random Airbnb because you're like, well, this is it. I'm going to go ahead and get the fuck out of here before anybody can catch me. And I'm like, okay, have a good night over there.
Okay, you can absolutely count how many times it is. And it was like 4, 5 maybe.
I mean,
and it was in the
know.
first year. I told you. When we met, I was like, I struggle with on-ramps. Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm so thankful though to have somebody that, like, it is just that awareness, like being able to hold paradox, have real feelings, but then assess it in a more logical way of, let's not create a narrative out of just 1 or 2 signals here. Let's like actually think what's going on. What are they experiencing? And then being able to, obviously reference astrology and human design and really like sit back in that. And I mean, it's good. I just feel like when I am internal, there's a part of me that sometimes doesn't. I would rather be, excited to be more social and kind of engaged, but I can't help but just like I need to isolate for some reason, and not having guilt about that anymore. Like it used to be really, I felt guilty about that in every situation with my other relationship, but even with the band and stuff, I was always like kind of feeling guilty that I wasn't going out and engaging more. I just wanted to be isolated in my room. And it was hard to actually, be productive in those moments as much as possible, because I'm isolated and, studying or just being in my own energy, but I'm also feeling a bit guilty and kind of rushing through it. And so it's so nice now to like just have this trust that I don't need to feel guilty about it. And it is, I feel like it's just the knowledge of it, being able to like know that that's a certain effect, or like just understand the astrology of it and see it represented and then go, oh, this isn't something I need to take personally. I can, it's maybe not something I prefer, but I can kind of wait through it, and we can come together and talk about it like we did with whatever that transit was, Aries or whatever. But no, it's so nice to not have to feel guilty about some of the personal things that I like to do,
Yeah. And I think
that was a hard habit to break, I think, in the beginning. That's what we were going through for a little bit. Not, I would say yes to you when I meant no, because I just thought I was going to be in trouble or something if I wanted to stay home and not go to the mall or whatever.
Well, and it's normalized in relationships that your partner should do things out of guilt or obligation. And I like mentally do not believe in that, and have not believed in that for most of my adult life. But I've always been kind of conflicted and torn between, I do not logically want my partner to do anything they don't want to do, but then we have this programming inside of us that goes, well, he should want to do it. And, I've said that to partners, which is really a psychotic idea. Like, it's a psychotic codependent idea if you think about it, because different people like different things. They're drawn to different things. And if I want to go to a mall, this is a terrible example for me because this would not be something I want to do, but if I want to go to the mall on a Saturday And I think you should want to do that because I want to do that, you know, and if you loved me, you would want to do that. You might have a part of you that's like, well, I want to make you happy, but I'm still not sure that even that is coming from a place of like the obligatory part of that. I don't think that's coming from a place that is love. I think that's coming from a place of social contract.
Right.
Right. And so there's that is a huge trap where if I obviously love it when we are kind of wrapped up in each other. We have these we kind of have these ebbs and flows, and we have these like kind of honeymoon phase periods where nobody can even get our attention because we're kind of wrapped up in each other. And it's usually around concepts or ideas or whatever, but it's also romantic. And then I love that phase. And then I love the phase where we kind of go do our own thing because it's also nice for me to get to go do that thing by myself. And then sometimes that lasts longer than would be my pick, And so I'm eager to get back to that kind of wrapped up in each other thing because it's fun. And it's easy, I think, in that when you then don't want to do that. And this has maybe happened a handful of times in our relationship, but like if you're not in that space to do that, or this is kind of an extended internal period for it to go on, like it's really gone on since Japan. It's usually weeks, that ebbs and flows are like weeks. The temptation in less conscious versions of myself, less aware versions of myself, of my own internal experience, is to take that as rejection and to take the fact that you are wanting, I guess for you right now, it's like music, book, Call of Duty. And
hey, just...
Just kidding. He plays Call of Duty for like 20 minutes every night. It's nothing.
It is almost every night lately, but at the end of the day, it's just like me wanting to go,
It's just so funny because you're so self-conscious about it.
I know. I hate it. I'm working on just owning my, all of our little quirks that bring us happiness. It has such a bad stigma about it.
It does have a bad stigma about it. I did ruin a relationship over it. The episode about men hitting trees with sticks was about video games. I did have a big wound about it. You do not have a video game addiction at all.
Yeah.
But even the way you went around buying the Xbox, you were like floating it to me. You were just like kind of trying to get me into the videos. And I was like, dog, go buy yourself.
And I had so many excuses like, well, it's because I got this nerve pain. I'm sick. I need something to do. And like, maybe I should buy one. I don't know. What do you think?
The kids could really enjoy it. I'm like, dude, go buy your Xbox. They never
play it. They play
you
it
already
every
had one
now and
reserved at Best Buy.
It is just on a side as one good excuse for it. I mean, there is a lot of amazing metaphor, as we've talked about before, through video games that apply to life. There's so many, like, as I play it and kind of get lost in those worlds, there's a lot that I keep picking up on that is like, this is so similar to the way reality works, where you get wrapped into the illusion. Once you're playing for a while, you're like in that world, and you feel like even with the controls, it's like it's an extension of your body, and then you take it really seriously, and then you come out of it when you're done and you're like back to this world. It's like a dream state kind of.
Yeah.
But in the way that everybody, when you're playing online, like everybody across the world is all kind of like plugged into this similar world that does have no location really. It's like in the ether, but we're all connecting, and I don't know. There's so much that I think there is like interesting conscious metaphor and benefit for actually like going into one, so that's my excuse. I'm studying consciousness while I play Call of Duty.
Yeah, I mean, I do not subscribe to the hierarchy of experiences, which is I invented that idea. But I don't subscribe to, he's out playing pickleball as an inherently more valuable experience than playing video games. I think when you're awake, when you're conscious and you're living that internal experience, everything you're doing is through the lens of consciousness, and you're learning about consciousness through it. And so I don't subscribe to like that you should be embarrassed about what you're doing there. Same thing with like scrolling TikTok. I'm scrolling TikTok all the time. You're not going to convince me. The amount of things that I've learned about places I've never been and I'll never be, and the experience of other people is where my perspective is growing at this present time. And it's in bite-sized morsels with this someone with ADHD. Like, these things were not available to me before because I need fast moving to the point things. And so sorry if it's frying everyone else's attention span. My attention span's been like this the whole time. Everyone sitting around glamorizing the 80s was torture for me because my brain has always been like, okay, get to the point. And so I couldn't learn for a lot of my life. It was a learning disability until reality started going balls to the wall, short form, whatever. So I don't believe in the hierarchy experience. The reason it ruined my relationship when I was in my 20s was because now in retrospect, he was on the spectrum. I didn't have that I didn't have that category of reason. With raging PDA, he got very into a video game very early in our relationship, and then did the like special interest, can't stop, whatever. And I was too young, too traumatized, too high on meth to like introspect back then. And I made it about me. And then I was constantly trying to get him off of the video game, which, you know, you've experienced in like past relationships, right? Like if you're up there like reading a book and I go up while you're reading the book and like, come on, can you stop reading the book? I want to do something. You don't ever want to do anything with me. Or I come at it with like a fight or whatever, which I did that shit when I was young. It's like, okay, well, now I'm never stopping.
Yeah, now I'm going to be here for another week just because the PDA is like overwhelming.
And it's like not, you know, I would like force him out of the house and stuff. And for a long time, I thought I was the victim in that scenario. And you eventually heal to a point where you go, oh, if I had just let him finish that fucking game and not taken it, but I took it as a statement about me. I had this like story that you brought me here and you left me. And so even though I loved the fact that he was super introverted, I loved having all that time to myself, if I was being honest. I had a million friends back then. Like I was going through my awakening. There was so much more I could be doing. But the fact that he liked that video game more than me, which he did not, but the fact that I like that wound of you brought me here and left me, you told me you loved me, the honeymoon phase ended, now you're like, you know, jamming to Diablo 2 or whatever the fuck it was. And so I made the video game my enemy and I put myself in opposition to it. And then I am exclusively attracted to people who are extremely obstinate and don't like to be told what to do. And so I created that scenario for myself. And so it's interesting now. I've like obviously learned a lot from my past relationships. It's interesting now to it's just feelings. So I go, oh, okay, there's a part of me that's afraid that you think I'm boring now, or that, you know, I think my novelty wears off, or I have this thing in my head where, you know, people think I'm funny or interesting or whatever. I'm like, yeah, until you're around it for a long time and you realize I'm just kind of a loop of like whatever things you've heard me say. And I don't know if that's real or not, but I have that story in my head. And so, you know, when you look like, you know, a cat has cornered a bird, you look like the bird. When I try to stop you in the kitchen, there is a part of me that goes, he's fucking tired of this. Like, this is the beginning of the end. Like, he's bored.
Yeah.
He finds you irritating. And that, I think, is the shit that would make me then make it my partner's problem.
Right.
And now I go, I'm just going to sit with that. And if I've been sitting with it for a while, like I think, you know, I checked in a week or two ago and just said, like, just checking it. I think I already know the answer to this, but is this situational, circumstantial, or are you feeling
over it?
Weird or different, you know? I just wasn't vulnerable enough to be able to do that before. And I think that that's the old relationship model is you should get off the video game because it's hurting my feelings, or you should stop reading that book because you haven't spent time with me. You should want to spend time with me. If you loved me, you would want to spend time with me. I want to spend time with you. And it's like, we've been together for almost 5 years. We are together we don't leave this house much. And so there are ebbs and flows that are just kind of natural. And I'm just thinking about ways in which it's normalized to damage relationships with obligation rather than actually staying open to what is like potentially happening.
Yeah.
You know,
that's what my experience too with any kind of my particular isolation, wanting to be in my own energy, whether that was doing music, playing a video game, working in the yard, doing whatever, just like kind of being this very focused in one direction and wanting to pursue it so much that it doesn't, if you're a partner of me, like it is hard to kind of penetrate that aura. And in the past, it was always, it comes in waves. Like it would be really accentuated for a moment of time. And then I would eventually kind of get bored with it or get like, okay, I want to do something else. And in my past relationships, it would be like, then I would really want to engage with the partner and go do things and be open. And I had difficulty with like, there was no acceptance of that this is a wave, it's going to come back. It doesn't mean that I'm like permanently not wanting to engage. This is just a moment where I'm like needing to engage in something else that I sometimes don't know the reason. It's like I'm needing to isolate just because my energy's done trying to plug into other people, or I'm trying to crack some code in my my life and needing to reflect on things and really like sit with them. And when I would get pushed to like feel guilty about that and get kind of this like obligation, like you should want to hang out with me, I would always be like, yeah, I guess I should, but like I don't right now, but I will soon.
Right.
Just let me do this, you know? I could never really properly communicate that in the past. I didn't have the awareness enough, but I knew that's what always would occur. And so there's like, again, being able to allow somebody else just do their thing the way they want to do it, like it will come back at a certain point where there's going to be like a heightened engagement because there was a long break, you know?
Yeah.
And that was also, I think, something that I just experienced being very independent and liking my own kind of control of my reality that was sometimes not compatible with somebody else. But in the long form, like it would always oscillate in and out. And I enjoyed getting breaks from someone that I really loved and I cared about them and I wanted to engage with them, but like I needed a break from it. And that was always seen as bad and that I don't care enough, but it would always come back. And there was just, I think that's just how some people are. Like they're really in love with someone, but they enjoy the break and then the excitement of coming back and having almost like another honeymoon phase. Like I really missed you. I've been away in my brain doing all this other stuff. I want to tell you about it. I want to engage. Yeah, it was a huge point of contention in a couple of my other relationships.
Yeah, and I could see how like a more codependent version of me, because I think I've had this, I've been on the other side of this, where I'm very independent. I like to do my own thing. You know, but I am drawn to people who are just like a notch more than that, because then I never have to have that. I never have to be the guy having that conversation, I think. It's all subconscious. But, you know, I think if you're looking at it from the old love paradigm, then it's like, well, okay, so I just live on your waves. Like we just do it whenever you want to do it. And then that's when it kind of comes down to like compatibility. It's like, yeah, are you compatible with that? For me, it's a tremendous opportunity to sit with that wound that I can't get access to unless it's triggered.
Yeah,
you
totally.
know? And it's an opportunity to reparent. And then it's an opportunity to be like, am I really craving that connection because I need that connection? Or am I afraid of what the distance means? You know? Yeah, I was doing a session with someone the other day, and it's just so funny how much we've been conditioned by this codependent cross of planning idea of relationships that's really based in like guilt and obligation and self-pity. And it just runs underneath in a way that we are all just like children trying to get our needs met without directly asking for what we want. So we were talking about, it's just this kind of like common story where I buy them thoughtful gifts and they don't get me the right kind of gifts, or I planned a thing for our anniversary and they don't, you know, and then I planned something for their birthday and they didn't plan anything for my birthday. And it's like, I've done so much of that in relationships. And so I was just thinking about how I've been capable of more maturity in this relationship than like when I was younger. You know, like a younger, less healed version of me would be like, I make a big deal for your birthday and you don't do anything for my birthday. But I'm not saying that about you. But now I've learned, like last year, because the anniversaries are the only thing that are like really important to me. I don't like any of the fake holidays. I don't celebrate Valentine's Day, whatever. But anniversaries are a big deal. And we've had some sort of catastrophe every single year for our anniversary. And so last year I was like, hey, could you plan a fun anniversary for us? Like, I don't even want to know about it. I want it to be a surprise. And then you planned the most beautiful little trip, and you were a blast during that trip, even though you were sleep deprived with like a nerve injury and you had to sleep upright in a chair. And I think like I just asked you for what it was I wanted to experience. I didn't ask you passive aggressively. I didn't like start the conversation by telling you never plan anything. I was just like, I would like, you know, this. Could you do this? And I feel like the old codependent, and you were just like, yeah, sure. You know, I feel like the old codependent thing would rather sit around and lament that you hadn't planned one before that.
Right.
Without just directly fucking asking for it. And
directly asking from an actual, like, honest place when you're just literally like, this is kind of something I would want. Like, do you think you could do that? It's much easier for me to just be like, oh yeah, like I want that too. And like, no problem. But if that was coming at me with some kind of guilt, like you've never done this before, and I really just, all I want is this, you know, then it's going to rub up against this. Okay, am I bad? There's something wrong with me. No, I love this person. I'm in my own world or whatever, you know, that then it creates that obligation. And now I'm kind of doing it from a place that is just to make you happy, instead of from a place that like, I love and care about her and I want to, you know, have this experience and surprise her. And so I mean, I think that's like a huge part of it, is if you can really just tap in and ask honestly. Like most people are going to feel the compassion and the like sensitivity under that and want to pursue, instead of it really feel like I'm being told to do it or reprimanded
or guilted or like, yeah, because it's not even like you should want to do this to make me happy. Like the code under the wiring under the board of that is like, we love the feeling of making each other feel guilty and ashamed.
Yeah.
Like in this culture, we love that. And we love, you know, to make our partner, see our partner jealous. Like we think that's love, to guilt them and shame them into doing things, you know, to pressure them to go do something they don't want to do. And then we're like, the fact that you're here doing something you don't want to do means you love me. And it's like, that's pretty cross of planning. I mean, that's pretty dedicate your life to something you hate for someone outside of yourself. And then it doesn't really benefit me to have anyone do something they don't want
like
to do.
Like performatively. Yeah.
Right.
It's not real.
And so it's like, well, you never this isn't you, but like you never spontaneously plan anything for me. Yeah. It's just not how this person operates. Like truly, it's not how your brain doesn't work like logistics. You're not a logistics person. And so I'm constantly out here looking for something to plan. I have like a coordinator brain. I love doing stuff like that. So of course, when it's like, you know, there had been several attempts to like plan an anniversary thing for me. And I, you know, it was like one year I got super sick with Lyme. One year we lost the baby, you know, the next year it hadn't gone well. We moved, I guess, one year. And so it's not something you're unwilling to do, but it's also not something that's just naturally going to occur to you because it's just kind of not your nature.
But I think it's also interesting, like when I'm asked that way and it's like, it's soft and compassionate, it's just very honest. I think there's also, it's easier for me to then get into my own, because I'm not being policed and like trying to get caught in every moment. Like, oh, you don't like me because you don't do this. You don't plan things. And I like to have things planned, or I want to be surprised. I think like, I'm just thinking about in that moment, it was easy for me to go, because I felt like you really wanted that. And then I was like, oh, I haven't been super attentive to the like surprising with gifts and making things special. Like I have kind of been up my own ass, and I understand that's just like who I am. But I also then can much easier approach where I could do a little bit better and still be in alignment with what I want. But like, I think it was easy for me to accept, like, get access to a part of me that actually did honestly feel not guilty, but like, oh, I could do more. Like that's not something that's out of my, out of the possibility of me like engaging in that, even though I'm up my own ass all the time. It's like, I could do better. And so I think that's also, it's like when you have just honest, open conversations that are not like that cop energy policing and that gotcha, it's much easier for the person to actually move into a place of them that they're like, can realize in themselves, you know, oh, I could be actually showing up a little bit more. I like doing those things and I want to, and I'm aware that, yeah, maybe lately I have been up my own ass. So let me engage in that a little bit more, at least for me. And it's probably the PDA thing. It's just easier to then go, well, I could do better. So let me like, you know, do that.
Yeah. And I think it's very like, I think it's human nature. And this is my issue with people squawking at each other, like politically, like, you know, arguing on the internet or whatever about your opinions. It's like, you don't actually want any like resolve, because this is not PDA or not. Like, and if you don't know what PDA is, you have to go back to the spiritual germophobia to get the breakdown. But like most people don't like to be told what to do. So we're talking about like extreme obstinance,
pathological
demand avoidance. Yeah.
Not public display of affection.
Not public. This is very confusing if you're hearing this conversation through that. Most people don't like to be talked to like that. Very few people are like, oh, I love this. Some people will fawn in that, but most people don't like to be told that they're bad. And so I think because of a lack of vulnerability, I don't know, or just like not knowing, like just still being kind of conditioned by that codependent stuff. When I was younger, I just would approach, I think I liked the drama, if I'm being honest. Like I subconsciously liked the drama and playing out my story also. I think it's layered, but I would want that. I mean, when I was really young, like my first marriage, I would rather the drama of you forgetting the anniversary than to even bring up the anniversary. And then as I grew up and realized I'm being a fucking chaos demon, I learned like, okay, this partner does not remember birthdays. Fucking let him know your birthday is coming up. Don't set him up for failure so that you can have an excuse to be upset or whatever stupid shit. So it's been a process for me. I was definitely not modeled healthy relationship by my mom, but yeah, and it was so thoughtful. Like there are things that I really like. I'm less someone who's like, oh, thank you for buying me this material possession that I could have bought myself, you know, and more like drawn to someone making me something or something like thoughtful like that. And the whole weekend and the gifts and stuff, it was all just extremely thoughtful in a way that was like imbued with the energy of you enjoying these, like you could tell you enjoyed planning it. You enjoyed, you made like a cute book for us. And like, you could tell that that this was not obligation.
Right. It wasn't like a handout.
Right.
Yeah.
And that you were not doing it under duress, and you were not doing it to like check off like, okay, I've done my nice thing for the year. Now leave me alone. I'm going back to my man cave. like energetically it was very pure and sweet. And like you were able to be open to do that because, and not sucking my own dick here, because this is literally like I learned this on this experience, you know, because I just asked for what I wanted and didn't ask for what I wanted via telling you you're failing.
Right.
Which is just so fucking normalized. It's so fucking normalized when, if you really think about how, like if I think about how I operate as a person, if you came to me and said, you know, I really care about anniversaries, and I've told you I really care about anniversaries for the whole thing, and you like never put any effort forth or whatever, and like ignoring the fact that I have ADHD or that I like some of these things are difficult for me, or I don't naturally think that way because I'm a different person than you. I feel like in holding space for like, I think you used to be like this when you were younger, and it, you know, you had traumatic experiences or whatever that changed that for you. But seeing like, you're not doing this because you don't care about me, or you're not, you know, I'm not going to attach all my fucking stupid stories to you and project that onto you. I don't know. It was, and then I think about that on the scale of everything, right? So if you're discussing something with someone you disagree with on the internet and you don't understand, you don't care to understand them as a person, you just want to scream your opinion in their face and then shame them for not holding the same opinion. You know, you don't care about repair. You don't care about opening that person's mind or heart. You're just like, I don't know, fucking the window or something. I don't know what the purpose of that is. But
what do you think the addiction to that drama is? Is it like trying to validate someone's, you know, inability to accept themselves? It's like past traumas, but the addiction to that gotcha moment. I got you and you don't love me. You know, like it's almost like to a point where you kind of manifest that reality out at some point. But there's, I mean, obviously online you can see it everywhere. It's just like everyone is addicted to being the victim or the perpetrator and like, gotcha, I gotcha, see, I've been right. Is it to validate our own feelings, you know, of discomfort?
Yeah, I mean, I guess what it's got to be to validate different things for different people. I had a story, you brought me here and left me, that I projected onto every man I've ever loved.
And that was from childhood, probably, right?
Yeah.
Your
So
mom.
my mom left when I was 2. I don't know how much that affected me, but then my dad raised me alone until I was almost 6. And then I was like, how come I don't have a mom? My dad's very like emotional, dramatic. And so he, in like a beautiful way, I don't know. I think he thought that, oh, this is the moment, you know, this is the early 80s. So it's still very like girls need their mom or whatever dumb shit. And so he took me out to my mom and then he left me there. And I didn't know her because it'd been years. And she's rough around the edges. She was then rough around the edges. And you would never in 2024 just like drop a kid off, even if it is her mom, and then just like leave when you're the only parent she's ever known. But we weren't that conscious back then. And so he thought he was doing the right thing. And he's also like, fuck, I don't know. It's not even 30 yet. And I believe this must be where the story you brought me here and left me came from. But all the loves in my life, I had this similar theme where beautiful romantic period, we come together, and then really honestly it was nothing. Like with my first husband, and I shit on him in the last episode, and I do want to go back and say he's one of the kindest people I've ever met in my life, and he taught me a lot, and he just was like a Christian who didn't get to fuck other people before we got married. And so he just...
This is your first husband, right?
Yeah, he cheated on me a few times, but the reason I knew he cheated on me is because his guilty conscience. I could just be like, I already know what you did. You might as well tell me. And then he would spill his guts because he felt extremely guilty. So I never end up telling his full story, but he's a good person who, suffered under being indoctrinated into Christianity and all that guilt and shame and whatever. But, yeah, we were like clearly in love. He was clearly in love with me. And then you know, if he wanted to go, one time he was trying to go hunting with his friends and I jumped on the car. I'm 16, but I jumped on the hood of his friend's car.
To stop him?
Crying and wouldn't let him go. Yeah, because every time he was out of my sight, I thought he was going to cheat on me. I don't even know if I guess he had cheated on me at that point. But
He's going to cheat on you with a fucking moose? I mean,
yeah, I mean, I just thought that they were like sneaking to Vegas or something. I don't know. There was a lot. I had a raging rejection complex. If you just told me like no over something minor, I got like overwhelmed, hot, like body on fire. Like I had a lot. I've had to work through a lot of shit to learn how to be healthy as I am now, which is probably not peak health. I also got addicted to catching him cheating because there's nothing more extremely painful but absolutely juicy as far as like the part of us that likes to go to sleep and experience suffering. You know, there's something really exciting about catching someone. You know, I think it's that one line investigator in me. And so,
well, is it also too? That's kind of what I'm pointing to. Is that with the question is like, is it? It feels good to catch somebody doing you wrong, which enforces the narrative of you did bring me here and left me.
Yeah, and
that makes the pain that you've felt with that valid now, and it's a kind of goes okay, like that's why I'm suffering.
Yeah,
which really is, you know, the roundabout, like long roundabout way that you have to realize is like I need to process that and figure out myself that I wasn't left. It wasn't about me. The parents had their own kind of illusion going on. They were asleep. It was a time where that was okay, and I did suffer from it, but that doesn't mean that like every relationship when I'm getting close that the same thing's occurring.
Right.
But when that's subconscious, then you're actually like reenacting it and looking for any sign that makes that true, because it makes it feel better, I guess, some way that that trauma that happened a long time ago is true and it's still occurring, you know. But it's that infinite loop where we're addicted to the drama to reinforce a past traumatic moment, and we'll never solve it that way. Obviously, it's like somehow really moving into the understanding that trauma was not necessarily about you, you know.
Right. And I did absolutely. I mean, there were situations where I manufactured experiences almost to relive that wound.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again. And then to take someone playing video games personally. Now, when you're on meth, we were talking like 3 or 4 days till there's blisters on the fingers to finish, you know, but I'm also like on meth, so everything's exaggerated. But I absolutely was looking for someone to love me enough to rescue me from my own abandonment wound.
Yeah.
And I think the beauty of the experience I had, you know, the twin flame experience, whatever you want to call it, like the experience I had with Aaron, was the first time out of like all the times I'd ever been in love, which I think is like 5 times. That was the first time that anyone actually was rejecting me. Like that was like every relationship I ever had, we were just in a relationship very fast. Like, and it was mutual and nobody was trying to get out of it. I had never dealt with someone who was back and forth with me or anything. I'd never dealt with that in my life. And so to have that with someone where we had something that was pretty, you know, romantic sometimes, but then he was very, I don't want to be in a relationship, but then maybe I do want to be in a relationship, but then I think that was really from guilt for me. And, you know, it was just kind of all over the place. It dysregulated me to the point that I had no choice but to really address where that story was coming from. And when I look back now on a lot of that thing with him, a lot of it was introversion. You know, we were work partners. We did podcasts together. We were touring, doing stand-up together. The first couple of days would be like a mini, and when we lived in different states, the first couple of days would be like a mini honeymoon. And then he would need space and I would need space, but I would be so focused on him needing space and what that was saying about me that I wouldn't even notice that, like, bitch, we're in the same room. We need space, you know? And so that was extremely hard opening, very painful, very difficult for 2 straight years, and taught me so much about myself that in this dynamic, I've been able to be relatively conscious and aware of a lot of that stuff that would have, like, otherwise I would have just destroyed this relationship pretty quick. First time we went through one of those cycles, I think I would have started to chip away at the foundation, where I don't feel like I've done that. Like, I don't feel like I've done a lot of destructive behaviors. And so I'm extremely grateful for...
Except for making me go to Japan.
Listen, I got a lot of alone time on that trip, actually. That was my isolation period.
Yeah.
I have to pee really quick, and then I have some other subjects for us to talk about.
I'm going to pee too.
We're going to have some chewing ASMR for a second.
And my my tick that I currently have, the like,
Is that back?
Yeah, it's been back since I think COVID, because I think I had some throat issues, you know? Whenever I have some kind of, like, I used to have allergies that would make me just incessantly sniff all the time when I didn't really have to, because I don't know. And so, like, sometimes when I have a throat thing, I all of a sudden start doing this, like, grunting that is so uncontrollable. It's like...
I think it's so cute.
Yeah, I'm glad you think all these little autistic ticks are cute.
I remember within like a week of meeting each other, we were, I think, just like laying down next to each other or something. And you made that noise, and then you went, "I'm sorry you had to hear me make that noise."
I got a little picked on in other relationships from it. It wasn't like super picked on, but people were like, why are you doing that? What's like, didn't want to accept that it was like, even when I explained, I used to have allergies and I just have this like nose twitch thing. I'm not aware I'm doing it half the time. But then they were just kind of like, this is weird. You know, it felt like judgment.
Oh, I love ticks. Long time friend of mine, but we are often living on other sides of the country and we lose contact for years at a time. I saw for the first time in 10 years after I got clean. And he used to have a tick where he would have to tap his nose 5 times and then his chin twice. It was a huge part of who he was. And so then when I saw him again after years, I go, "Oh, you don't do the thing anymore with the tapping the nose." And he was like, "God damn it, Jessa." And started doing it again. He's like, "I haven't done this in 3 years."
They're hard to break, man.
They are. I'll pick up other people's ticks.
I definitely don't have that.
Yeah. So I have a friend whose tick is that it looks like his eyes are rolling in the back of his head.
I almost wonder if those ticks are like small glitches in the nervous system or in something, that it just is, whether it's the toxins or maybe it's just specific, you know, people that are a little bit more like neurodivergent, like that. This is how it displays. It's a uniqueness, but it always feels like the way that it's so automatic in me sometimes. I'm like, is there it's like some glitch that it's like I don't know what to do with the energy or something, so it's just like coming out in a weird way. Hyper focus.
Yeah, I just think about how fast your brain makes connections to things. Like when I smoke cigarettes, how much talking on the phone had to have a cigarette with it. Like how quickly those two things became connected. Or now I can't eat popcorn without kombucha because my brain is like, those two things go together. I have to have a hot beverage after I eat food, you know? And so it's like it takes such a short period of time for something to become a belief or habit in your subconscious. It's like 21 days. So I just feel like your brain connects, you know, if you had those allergies for a long time and maybe you were sniffing because your nose was running when you were a kid. Now, you know, your brain is like, we do this all the time.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know if I should have the video. Probably not, because it's probably copyrighted to hell. But
for what?
I was going to talk about Bashar. This came up on a Q&A on the Patreon. And I thought it might be a fun conversation for us to have here. Assuming everyone knows who Bashar is. But Bashar is what's it called?
A social memory complex.
A social memory complex.
I don't know if that's actually what they say it I guess no. It probably is.
Because the social memory complex is when, like right now, we have a social memory complex of humans because we are part of one organism, right?
But it's woefully asleep.
It's woefully asleep. So
unified.
we believe we're all separate from each other.
Right.
So there is a social memory complex, but we don't all have access to it yet.
We're building one, I think is what it would say.
So there will come a day where the human race will share one consciousness, which I do believe we're working towards.
Yeah.
I think it's what we call the ether.
And you could say that these channels that come through that state that they're a social memory complex are aspects of us in the future. It's like what we would eventually become.
So Law of One, the Cassiopeans, that Laura Knight Yazek. And I believe Bashar is not a dude. It's a name given to a collective consciousness. Yeah. Right. And so Daryl Anka channels Bashar and has been doing so since the 80s, I believe, and has obviously gained popularity in a massive way in the last 10 years as people have woken up further and further. I don't think I'd heard the name many times, but I don't think I started seeing videos and actually paying attention to Bashar. I think we were in this house, so it's got to be like a year and a half max.
I was obsessed in 2016 to 2020. I was so obsessed. I was buying, because at the time there wasn't a lot of it on YouTube like it is now. You had to go pay for them, and so you had to download the MP3s. And I still have on one of my hard drives. I've saved it all. I spent hundreds of dollars, just
yeah. You do have a sick file of Bashar.
Yeah.
So, I mostly like it in TikTok form, where it's just here's the one question and the answer to the one question. Things that really I was drawn to it. I think I'd come across it several times, but you sync up with things when you need them. And I think last year, or about a year and a half ago, I was really still kind of working through not wanting to talk into microphones anymore because I couldn't handle the pressure. And I wanted to talk about individuality, and I didn't feel like people were ready to talk about individuality, whatever. I was working through my own shit. And the Bashar videos I was coming across were empowering to me because that is how the aliens talk. And the subjects that had been willing to discuss up until that point that I had come across were very similar to the way that the aliens are. The aliens that I'm communicating with are not zoomed in on personal life stuff at all. And they're relatively mocking kind of things I'm taking very seriously in a way that I think is off-putting for people who don't really get it. I think he gets a lot of the same criticisms that AOD gets.
Yeah.
Although I do think some people who have recently found AOD, I stopped saying at the beginning of every episode that this is a joke or whatever. So I think some recent listeners of AOD videos on YouTube and then on the actual AOD are not getting the gag.
Yeah.
And so they are thinking that I'm just a person screaming at them, which I guess is a little bit off-putting. But anyway, the character I'm playing on AOD is how the aliens that I know have always talked. They are capable of empathy and compassion. It's usually when I'm being the opposite, so when I'm being judgmental of myself or others, I will see a more kind of compassionate, but it's never coddling. And I think here specifically in Western white American, whatever, our culture is very oriented around coddling and not saying what you mean. We don't have a great culture around just blunt speech. I hope we're getting to that. Say what you actually mean. Don't fucking oh yeah, that's very nice. And then as soon as I turn my back, be like, oh, I can't fucking stand her. That's very much our culture is very built on manners over honesty.
Yeah.
So I love it. This cat is really getting ready to fuck up this recording. I have never felt offended by his vibe, or the way that he speaks. Anyway, all that to say, recently there have been a couple answers to questions that Bashar has answered that I have gone, these are the first times that I go, if my initial impression of what you're saying is what you're saying, I don't resonate with it. But they are also, well, there was one about Putin that was just so fucking weird, but I don't think he was channeling Bashar at the same time. He was channeling someone else, but it seemed biased.
Yeah.
And pretty zoomed in. And then there was one recently where someone asked about the election. And his answer was, I feel like I should play it, but his answer was first he goes on and on about how you need to take responsibility for this answer. And right. I think there's a chance if it was Bashar and that this wasn't getting squeezed through Daryl Anka's
biases
filter, right? Which is human. It's just like, it's not good or bad, but it's just, if you're being used as a channel and you have strong biases in one direction or an attachment, or you're afraid of getting in trouble, or you want to you're going to slow that channel down and you're going to filter it through your own perception. And that's why the best channels are people that are extremely open. Open-minded, open. And so I think there's a chance that it just went through his biases. And so that's why you got kind of that answer. Or it is like purposefully filled with riddles.
Yeah.
To show like different people are going to interact with this differently, which absolutely was the case. But anyway, so he said, we don't ordinarily talk about things like this, which is what the aliens would say to me. The question was like, can you tell us anything about the election or the outcome of it or something? Yeah. I don't even know that I've seen the question part of it. And I feel like it's maybe a mistake to even be getting into this right now without the recording right here. But
I can look it up. I mean, I don't know if it will be copyright.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we will just to listen to it and then not leave it in the recording.
Impact especially the humanity and especially Canada.
How does the upcoming election impact humanity?
Oh, interesting.
One moment. We are checking something. Because generally speaking, we are not really allowed to comment deeply on your politics. But since things are changing somewhat in the near future, we are checking to see what we are allowed to say. I cannot give you specifics about the country of Canada. I am allowed to give you some very general specifics about the election in the United States. However, there must be caveats with this, since we are normally not allowed to comment on such things. There are certain things we can say, but if we say them because it is your world, are you willing to take responsibility for the responses of your population to what we are about to say? And before you answer, think carefully about what that means. Are you willing to take responsibility for what we are about to say? Be sure the answer is yes.
Yes. Okay, can you pause that for a second? What the fuck does that mean?
That's what I think is the most important part of the then understanding what he's saying, because to me it's definitely riddled, right? And that's what.
And the aliens do that a lot.
The aliens do a lot, and the most channeled information that I've read that comes from the social memory complex, they're at least the ones that are on the STO thing, really truly service to others, they will not ever impede free will. And so oftentimes questions are asked and they give this very macro kind of nuanced answer. And they oftentimes, if they're trying to discern some, communicate some truth, the truth is within multiple layers of riddles through the language. And every word is really specifically placed to the point where the people that can hear and understand can figure that out. Most of those things are not to be taken super literally. It's really meant to be unpacked like word for word, the order they're in. If there's, a comma or a period in certain places, it's like all purposeful. It's all meant to be, and that's what I think's most important about this is it's like whatever your beliefs are, you're going to pick up something from it that might be different than somebody else who has different beliefs. You're going to get two different answers. And so that's what I think he's giving a warning about. It's like saying what I'm going to say, is nuanced, and you have to take the responsibility of trying to understand it and not just take your first thought and whatever your emotions are going to kind of be behind it to really understand the nuance of it,
Yeah, and you have to take responsibility for what we are about to say, which is interesting. And you have to take responsibility for how your community receives this.
And so then the other way, like you could also translate that as he's saying, with what we're going to tell you, you need to respond and be actionable on it and vote whichever way you feel to be true, So it's almost like, that's what was so interesting to me. There's like multiple ways to read it. And if you wanted to go with him being, the bias part of it, like the Daryl Anka coming through, he's then saying like, what we're going to tell you is, it's such an important decision to make that it's going to change your future. And so like, take responsibility in what we're saying. Now go vote, So it's like, which I don't agree with that. And I don't think that's what it was, but I could see how people could.
Yeah, because on the surface level, what a lot of people ran with, people that support this and people who don't support this, is vote Democrat and you can have open contact, which is its own conversation I want to have. If you don't vote Democrat, all these horrible things are, World War III and the end of the United States, which that one.
Yeah, so let's play it real quick.
Play that. I'm going to grab more coffee.
All right. This is what we are allowed to say. The female will lead to open contact. Do I need to say more?
No.
Are you willing to take responsibility for the information?
Yes.
The male will lead to the termination of the United States and World War III. End of comment.
Okay.
Understand that what we have been allowed to do here today is highly unusual and only indicative of the fact that you are closer to contact than you were before.
Okay, so it literally says the female will lead to open contact. That's it for that. And then the male will lead to the end of the United States and World War III.
Okay. Off the top, I believe we are on a timeline where we will see the end of the federal, like the end of the United States as one thing. It isn't working, and we cannot authentically be ourselves and be a part of something so huge, because all we're doing is fighting over like who gets to write the rule book through which everyone else has to live. And I don't believe that's sustainable. And I believe that will be the end. I think we will reach a point of consciousness and maybe a point of chaos in which there is some sort of civil war or something. But at some point, we're going to realize that this experiment is a failure and we will break up. I do believe that consciousness is about to shift quite a bit, and what people care about and what people think about is going to shift extensively in the next few years. And so it might be something that's relatively easy for us to do. But it also could be a leader comes in and just fucking blows it. And, you know, that's how it happens. I don't know. But there's no part of me that when I hear, and I'm saying this, I don't vote and I don't care about other people. I don't believe that a person, there's a personality. I don't resonate with either of those. So I don't have a bias in either direction. But the end of the United States is on the docket as far as I'm concerned. So that's interesting. I thought we were already in World War III. So that's also
well, that's what's interesting with the words. Again, if you like listen to the words and how they were said, he says the male will lead to the end of the United States and World War III. You could take that as the end of the United States and then we go into World War III. But then there's a lot of beliefs and a lot of people talk about like we've been in World War III. It's just a form of war that we've never seen before, where it's not as boots on the ground physical. It's a lot more through perception, controlling of perception, and the internet and this subtle like kind of control. There is also obviously physical war going on now too, but so you could read that as the end of the United States and the end of World War III.
Interesting. Yeah. All of the, and the female and the male isn't like interesting language to me. So what I believe is going to happen, and I'm terrible at predicting the sex of babies and also who's going to be president. But what I believe is going to happen is going to be trickstery as fuck. So whoever gets in there, it's going to go the opposite of how you're going to think. Like whatever their followers think. Because the purpose of these experiences is to wake people up to their personal power. So if you're telling yourself a story that if this person gets in, they're going to fix it. I don't think it's going to happen that way.
Right.
I think whatever it is, it's going to get flipped on its head. And the story, whatever that is, those stories are meant to lead you back to your own personal power. I don't have like a solid opinion, I don't think, on the Bashar thing. I have noticed there are certain topics where Bashar goes from talking very fast in alien type way to lots of pauses. Like there was one where he got like question about Israel. And suddenly Bashar is talking really slow. Bashar takes a lot of pauses in this one. I mean, I've never seen a thing where Bashar goes, hold on, let me check and see how, whatever.
I've seen him do that before. And he always does that clicking thing. Is like some kind of channel
there's that like clicking
hitting.
thing, yeah. So, and I also don't think I watch enough Bashar to have like a solid take. The stuff I'm really drawn to Bashar is the self-empowerment stuff, the take responsibility for yourself stuff, the ways that we are drawn toward our own, like, if you focus toward your preferences, that's what you're going to experience. The thing about people splitting off and then like being able to perceive everyone through energetic glass, but not even interacting with them, was so validating for me a year ago to hear, because that's that was an aspect of reality I think I was still thinking through the lens of the cross of planning, which was that we were all going to go have this exact experience. And like the internet gives you the illusion that you're on a timeline with people you're not actually on a timeline with. The thing I've never given a shit about, and it's just one of those things that like other people are really into and I'm not, is open contact.
Yeah, well, that's the one part of Bashar too that I in the beginning was like super into. But then the more I learned and the more I had my own experiences, I was like, this seems like a little bit of a trap. Like because that's one of the center points of the people that follow him. A lot of them are really putting so much weight on, we need open contact to finally change everything.
Yeah.
And they need to show up and they're going to, save us in some way. Still kind of putting it in like it's still self-empowerment. They're not going to come down and just fix everything, but they're going to come down and connect and inspire and still make it like, so it's still understood through this autonomy kind of like inward evolution. But I've never, there is so much pressure on that. And you can tell like everybody's always chomping at the bit and asking questions about when is it going to happen? Where are they now? Where is your, your UFO? Where's your craft right now? And he's always like, it's over Sedona. It's, 4,000 feet in the air. You can't see it. And we're waiting for the right time. We're going to come down and we're going to interact. And, we're all going to go into this new reality. Has always, like, the more I learned, I was like, that's where we've been tricked every time in the past, is like all of these civilizations would be like falling apart, or some cataclysm would happen. And then a group of beings comes down and is able to get the civilization to see them as a god or a higher power and teach them things with the stance of like, the civilization starts to worship them. And we get into this kind of, again, we're not empowering ourselves. We're giving our power over to this being that has come down and we perceive as God. And then we give up our authority again. And so it's like always been like, that's not how, the way I see it being us falling into some kind of utopia or like evolving into a new collective consciousness is going to come through like each individual person having their own, quote, contact and being able to learn and understand themselves and empower yourself, step into your power fully and learn how to not give it over to anything, any energy, anybody.
Right.
And so it wouldn't look like you can't have mass contact, because like when a civilization's not healed enough, like they're all going to worship it right away.
I think the open contact shit, I just assumed we were going to reach a point of consciousness where it would be very obvious that open contact was happening and it was non-physical. I just have never thought you have a physical 3D ship hovering over Sedona and some physical aliens are going to get out and that there's physical hybrid children somewhere. I think the hybrid children are here. They're all the neurodivergent, fucking extremely gifted weirdo by cross the planning standards kids. They've been here for generations. And I have found in years of taking things that aliens said literally, and then understanding that when reality changes, it's actually a crazy drastic change. But the way that reality seams it together, I think this is an idea put forth in Tufti, Tufti, the priestess, where she talks about reality being a movie and that there are no jump cuts. So there are like crazy new information that hits the planet, but we don't go from, when it's happening, it seems seamless. It makes sense. Like when we have a paradigm shift, the writers write in something to make the paradigm shift make sense. And it feels gradual. But if you like stop and think, who were you? What was the world about? Whatever in 2019, you realize it's actually really sped up. And I could be wrong. And I don't know for sure. But based on my own pattern recognition skills, and I do know reality is about to change drastically, and everything it means to be human is changing. I think many of us are already seeing those changes. I do know shock is a construct of the incoming reality. And so we will be experiencing things that are blowing our minds or would be blowing the minds of people who haven't been into this shit for a long time. And so from that perspective, kind of, yeah, it makes sense, contact. But the direction that we're being pushed is inward. And so I just can't, and everything that has come online, like the phones, have been a massive change in what it means to be human already. What it means to be human is much more inside of yourself. It's in your own energy, but you're connecting with people around the world. You're thinking more about yourself, what makes you tick. Like that came from the technology, or the technology has been the story through which we have experienced that. That has completely transformed the human experience in 13 years. I think I got my first smartphone in 2009, 2008. I just don't know what aliens showing up. First of all, I don't think that's a new story. I think that's happened to many civilizations. I don't know how that causes personal empowerment, because even if, and I say this as someone who speaks personal empowerment into microphones, it validates people who are already on that path. But I have created followers in the past with that as a human being, as a regular human being who's known for drinking her piss. I've almost started a cult. So it's about by talking about self-empowerment to disempowered people. So I just can't, there's no scenario in which physical aliens show up and that causes people who aren't in their power to be in their power. I just don't, what is the point of that? That's going to evolve.
The only thing I could think is like maybe he's talking about open contact is still on an individual level. So we're going to get to a place where there's open contact where everybody has, widened their awareness enough to be open to the idea of some other being communicating with them, and maybe for each personal individual showing up in the physical on some level, but it is individually based. And so maybe he's just saying that on a more grand scale, everybody will have that experience instead of it just happening, very kind of uniquely to some people and not to others.
Yeah.
But
and I do think we reach a point of consciousness where it's just not, it's mundane. That was the word I was looking for. Like as we move into more and more bonkers things, there is a mundane aspect to it. If aliens showed up tomorrow, it would not feel like duh. It would maybe get scientific materialists to wake up to consciousness, which I guess would serve a little bit of a purpose, but it would cause, we are not yet far enough outside of the need for a savior, that we're not far enough out of Jesus versus the devil, that it wouldn't just exacerbate that. I don't think.
No,
like now these outer planets could shift and people could be suddenly ready for it. But I do think there will be a point where we are openly in contact with beings from all over the place, because we're in an amnesia bubble, which is why we can't do that. And lots of us can do that. So lots of us, to us, it's not mundane. It wouldn't be, or it is mundane. It just wouldn't have like a super profound effect on my life, I don't think, for aliens to show up. I would be like, yeah, that belief that it's just us was like psychotic. It was psychotic that we ever believed that we were the top of the food chain in the galaxy and that we were the only intelligent life. Like that is such a unconscious thing to believe. Now what? But for a lot of people, and I guess I didn't tune into that until this, for a lot of people, open contact and these hybrid children are the reason they're listening to this guy.
Right.
Which also, if I really think about it, might just be a carrot he's dangling. He being Bashar, not the guy, but like a carrot being dangled because people's like desire for something outside of themselves can be used to lead them to themselves.
Right.
Because the information that he puts forth usually is very radical self-responsibility, like individual realities.
Well, and a lot of what his messages is always leaning on is the reason open contact has not happened yet is because people are not ready for it and they haven't done the individual work. So, and I think what his description of like who that consciousness is, like that specific Bashar coming through is, what does he call it? It's like open contact specialists or something. He's basically supposed to come into civilizations that are on the precipice of evolving into a new place of consciousness that inherently involves like connecting with other beings that are hyperdimensional and from all over the place. And so there's like his teachings are in preparation to raise people's frequency to a level where open contact is possible without it getting bent into a worship kind of scenario.
Interesting.
That's what he's like always saying. But, you know, then sometimes it's just when you see the weight that a lot of the people that show up and ask questions, some of them, you know, seem to be on the track of self-healing and doing it themselves. But then there's a lot of people that are still, there's so much weight on when is it going to happen? I need it to happen. I need it to happen. That it's like, I don't know if that is really the focus or not. But I mean, that's what he says. He's supposed to be a specialist that's prepping everybody through teaching self-empowerment and let your thoughts control your reality and all of these things like false beliefs. You need to get rid of decondition the false beliefs and do all of this so that open contact can happen and we won't, as a civilization, want to kill them or worship them.
Right. Yeah. So, because I'm trying to like trace like how I've interacted with that idea. And I guess the way I felt is just like we're very rapidly waking up. And that, I guess it's the same way I feel about rave children. In Human Design, he talks about like humans are going to give birth to a new race of beings, a new species, I guess is a word I'm looking for, starting in 3 years. And that they're not going to want anything to do with humans and that it's, you know, they're going to look kind of human, but they're going to be quite different. And their consciousness will be completely different and they won't even really associate with us. Like, that's so wild. That I'm just like, yeah, cool. I mean, we've done that like throughout history. We've mutated into different species. So I guess it's not that sci-fi, but I'm just going to wait and see what happens. You know, I'm just like, yeah, I'm not buying stock in that, but I'm just interested to see what's up. You know, he predicted a lot of things with these mutations that are happening, but that's, I guess, how I feel about the open contact thing. I don't think it'll never happen. I just think by the time it happens, it will be the result of us having elevated in consciousness that it's not a big deal.
Right.
And I have seen evidence of that where when the government's talking about aliens and stuff, people are like, who gives a shit? And then part of the reason that people are like, who gives a shit is because a lot of them can't, afford a gallon of milk. And so they're like, we're a little bit distracted by the rest of the shit right now. But yeah, so I just kind of assume, not that I thought that was bullshit, but I just assumed it's either metaphor that we don't yet know what that means, because that's been my experience in communicating with aliens, is I took a lot of things that they said literally, physically, I guess, and they were spiritual. They were astral or etheric or whatever. And so it's just kind of one of those things where I'm like, yeah, I guess we'll see. Like, because when you hear them talk about it, you think that there's like they have hybrid, half human, half whatever children in the desert somewhere, and that they're going to pop out and be like, surprise, that.
Yeah, it's such a weird thing, man. And I don't know, you can unpack this one simple statement so many different ways. Like, it just dawned on me. I mean, I went through the whole arc of, in the beginning, of my awakening and like trying to learn everything I could through religions, through conscious stuff, and then this like alien kind of presence and this galactic federation, and kind of like trying to put the pieces together. And at one point did want, I was like, yeah, fucking ready for some open contact, get some beings down here so we know that that's real. And they, I'm sure, are much more aware and smart than us, so we could learn. And then you look through all the ancient, stories of this happening multiple times. And it always, if you look at it just with one perspective, it was like, you know, when there was a huge cataclysm and then Quetzalcoatl came in and taught people how to do agriculture, and you know, taught things to be able to survive and advance. And then you blast forward and we have the scientific world and we have agriculture and we like advance into the technological revolution. So, oh, that's good. You know, this being came in and helped people. But then, you know, eventually you get to this point where you start to see the nefarious side of this whole thing, where when you start to unpack like time travelers and, okay, maybe these aren't all aliens. We call them aliens because we don't understand what they are, but maybe they are just humans and they're either time traveling or they've been able to hack their bodies where they can have longer lifespans. And there's a bigger chess game going on here. So for me, I finally got to a point where I was like, oh, anything that is overt, open contact that is impeding on someone's natural evolution and whatever they're experiencing, if that's a cataclysm or whatnot, like there's actually a lot of evidence to look at when those open contact events occurred, there was a mass manipulation point. Like they were getting somebody to think a certain way, whether that was like, we're going to create a religion by, you know, morphing into whatever God the culture has always worshipped and is in their like awareness. And we're going to present as that so they will trust everything we say and they're going to start moving in the reality and doing the things we say. So, or, there's a lot of deception with any kind of overt mass public contact, seeing that as something that is not impeding on free will, but it's something that comes in and subtly manipulates a person's consciousness to do a certain thing. That is not about self-empowerment. It's always about something else. And so looking at the thing, the female brings open contact, you can look at it in a way where it's like, okay, I don't have biases either. I don't vote. I don't care. It's just looking at wrestling match. And let's say that they could both be looked at as nefarious, but let's say the open contact, if we think of that in the past, has always been some pivotal point where they were able to, some other beings were able to manipulate a mass of people to do what they wanted to do. And so you could say that if the female gets into office, the open contact is going to come because now there's going to be enough control over the environment that they can come in. It can be a Project Bluebeam type of thing where everyone then gives over their authority, where we're so divided now, we all finally align because the aliens are here.
Right.
Bashar saying that as, and you know, his whole line of work, it's a positive thing, but maybe it isn't. And I don't know if that's like Bashar's nefarious or if there's some filter problem or what, but that's a potential. Then the other thing is, okay, let's say the contact is positive. If she gets into office and they, you know, they controllers, the corporate controllers of the reality actually start to be able to enslave people more, you know, in a very subtle way. It's like still allowing people's free will. They're choosing to elect somebody like that then takes their freedoms. Then the open contact where it's occurring because they made such a big move, the corporate people, and that they're actually going to enslave people more. So they come down to, quote, save it and turn that off, you know, and, you know, get rid of the government and change it. So there's so many different ways to look at it. The fact that open contact is such a controversial thing in my head, like, I don't know, I agree. I don't know how mass open contact is something that is healthy for any group of people. I mean, and you just look in the past, it never really was. It was in the short term, maybe it was like there were some positives, but it created religions. It created things that like people are constantly giving, they're being led to give their power away and only listen to some magical being.
Right.
And so that's the crux of it. Like, I just don't know if that's positive or negative on just the female side. Like, is he subtly saying, and then, I mean, you could do the same thing with the male side. Like, the end of the United States, most people go, bad. No, I don't want I don't want it to end. But then there's a lot of people that are like, we need to wipe this slate clean and start over and figure out, I don't know how we do that, but like, the United States as we know it needs to end because it's so corrupt. And so that could be a positive thing.
I don't think anyone's getting in there and fixing anything. I don't think anyone's getting in there and healing the nation like that. I don't believe that that's what we're slated for. I could be wrong. This is my own speculation. I think whoever gets in is going to betray the people on their side is the type of trickster fuckery that's slated. Is that, like,
I mean, that's always happened too, right? It's like almost always they get in there and some other shit starts happening.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel like if he gets in, he goes left. If she gets in, she goes right. Like that sort of like,
yeah.
What is on the docket is for your heart to get broken by the idea of an authority outside of you.
Yeah, once again, giving up your authority.
Right.
You know?
And I'm talking like energy of it. So I don't like to physically predict the future because I see things in kind of energy. But like that, what is on the docket is for us to be forced to realize that we are self-sufficient and that nobody outside of us is going to save us, whatever. Mm-hmm. So I don't believe anyone's coming in here and fixing shit unless it's a trick.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And so I think because of that, you and I are looking at everything like, what if you turn this thing upside down? What if you look at it sideways? Whatever. I think as soon as these energies hit, because I think of Gemini as an extremely trickster energy, because it is the two things. So I think when Uranus, which is very trickstery, hits fucking Gemini, shit's gonna get weird as hell. And people are still looking for the same mythology as the past. And we are going into a completely different video game. I don't know how to I want to scream this from the rooftops. Like, if you've been playing The Sims for the last 400 years and you're about to be playing Fortnite, I don't know if those games are similar. Like
Call of Duty, maybe.
Call of Duty, like you're about to be playing two completely different games. It's if you're still trying to run, and I say this is like myself included, like still trying to run things through the old. Oh, we were watching a documentary last night. We watched like a little bit of it. It was boring as hell, but what was it called? Join or Die. Which is such a great example of people trying to put the Cross of Sleeping Phoenix. By the way, I feel like when I'm editing episodes, I say Cross of Planning and Cross of Sleeping Phoenix every 5 seconds. I used to say Old World and New World. I just now have a better container for it. But sorry if I can't shut the fuck up about this, but this is the moment we're in. But so the Cross of Planning was about, like, it was collective and tribal. It was about the group. And this documentary was the guy who wrote Bowling Alone, which I think I remember hearing about that book like peripherally in the past.
Yeah, it was huge, yeah.
And so, you know, the premise was that like the United States was like propped up by associations and clubs. And I remember this when I was a kid. My mom was in a bowling league. My dad and stepmom are still in like several pool league, like whatever. And at some point, I tried to join a pool league with them, and I just am not drawn to clubs. I'm not drawn to that sort of thing. I think the closest is like when I was a Christian for a little bit, or, you know, in 12 Steps. I have like group dynamics, but I'm not drawn to belonging to things. And at the beginning of the movie, there's someone who says, like, I'm not drawn to joining. And I think the argument in this movie is a guy who says the most successful countries or states or whatever are ones that are communal in that, right? Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah, the ones that have a large amount of clubs and leagues and stuff that enhance community and kind of keep community as the basis of their governments. So I think he kind of even saying it's like democracy relies on a healthy club based in the collective.
Yeah, so I guess he was saying kind of that he predicted in Bowling Alone. Was it Bowling Alone?
Yeah.
Bowling something. He predicted that democracy was going to start to fall apart because of the decline in people being drawn to collective, like, tribal things. And the reason that people, I think this came in really with Generation X, you know, specifically like the younger half of Gen X, the Xennials or whatever, were just not drawn to clubs. Like, there's a lot of individual energy, and there are people who are still kind of drawn to that kind of stuff. I think those are people who are naturally wired for tribal and collective energies. But so watching that movie, you really kind of see people trying to put that genie back in the bottle and trying to slow the progress of the Cross the Sleeping Phoenix. And I think that that's also, I can't remember why I was saying that, but I think that's also really reflected in what people are looking for from this election. You know, there are people on dude's side that think he's going to fix the country. I don't think anyone's going to fix the country. It's not supposed to be fixed. It happened. We did it. Oh, in that movie, they show, like, I guess JFK. And they show the quote where JFK says, "Ask not what you can do for your ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country," or whatever. And I remember when I was young, people talked about that quote like it's the most groundbreaking shit that had ever been said. And I feel like I hear more inspirational one-liners off of podcasts and TikToks on a daily basis than that.
Yeah.
You know, and it's also really an interesting thought that people were having their lives changed by the concept of, like, what can I do for my country, which is extremely cross-planning. And that also happened right before the one line started, where we moved into, you know, every 60 years, the number changes, which we'll get into on a future episode. But we went into, like, the fear-based 60 years. And kind of, I think that was the beginning of the end, really. I think that there's I believe, because you can kind of trace it at the beginning of the cross of planning and now at the end of cross of planning, there's probably like 50 years of a cusp before it switches to another age, where it's like laying the groundwork for another age. And we are becoming more and more internal, more and more individual, more and more drawn to autonomy, less and less drawn to groups, less and less finding safety and security in groups, less and less interested in associations or collectives or whatever. And
which is covertly like a really good thing.
Yeah.
But I think it's, seen from the old way, I think, you know, this documentary is saying we need to grasp for that to save democracy, save the country, is have clubs become a thing again, you know? So it's like, it's seen as like a bad thing, but it really is something you can't really put that genie back in the bottle. You can try, but
it's this underlying fear of death, right? It's like you meet someone, you fall in love, and it's beautiful and it's amazing. And you're in love for, 5-6 years during a period of your life that you really make sense with each other. And then you start to grow in different directions. And the old codependent cross-planning way of looking at things is like, well, we have to fight to save this. And it's like, what's the cost to fight to save this? One of us is going to have to fail to progress. Like, one of us is going to have to stop progressing, because if I'm progressing to the north and you're progressing to the south or the east or the west or whatever, our paths are diverging naturally because we are just endlessly evolving. That's the premise of reality, is constant change and evolution. In order to go back to when it was good between us, one of us has to stop progressing, which is death. But we're afraid of the death of the relationship. Do you know what I mean? And so it's the same lens, because the cross of planning is, one of the constructs is continuity, and it's very linear, and it's like, finish what you started. It's conditioning has us believing we have to keep this thing alive. This is what it is to be a human. This is what worked in the past. It's like, okay, well, we're going to go do something different. And it's interesting to watch. It's interesting to watch us try to fix something that isn't working by like restoring it to a past version rather than going, well, I guess this is the end of this experiment, you know? Because we just never, but we don't have any of that like frame of reference.
Yeah, there's no context for what Cross of Sleeping Phoenix reality looks like. Like, what is an individual reality? And we're so conditioned to like anything that's individual based is selfish and not healthy because it's coming from a do something good for the group, you know?
And I think there's toxic expressions of individuality, and I think we've seen a lot of them in this transition. Yeah, and I think there's extremely toxic expressions of collectivism and tribalism. Yeah. And we're certainly seeing those as well. What I've noticed is individuals are starting to feel very liberated, and tribally, collectively wired people are feeling very afraid. And it feels like the end of the world to many of them, especially if they don't have this context. And it feels like the beginning of a new world for individuals. And it just will be the way that a collective tribal reality was uncomfortable for us. An individual reality will be innately uncomfortable for people who are not wired that way. They will have to find a way to have clubs while understanding that most of us won't want to be involved in them. I feel like we know people in our personal lives who are kind of like...
Clubby?
Huh?
Clubby?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never liked clubs and associations and leagues. It always just feels, it's like, for the people that aren't in the club, it's always like, oh, I'm not allowed to go associate with those people because I don't have the same interests. Or they all know something that I don't know, you know?
Yeah.
And I know, I mean, there are a lot of positive ones, you know, archery club and things that are like hobbies that people like to get together and like-minded. And I know there's like obviously a lot of positive communal stuff about that. And people that have never felt accepted and couldn't find friends find their group when they find their special interest has a you know, somewhere online that they can all get together and connect. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just stating I don't like clubs. It's also, you know, I mean, the first thing I was thinking of when watching that documentary is because they start off with the, what is that group called? Oh, the Odd Fellows. And then you obviously have like the Masons and the Rosicrucians, these like secret societies that seem to me to be like something that started off as a club, started off as something public and open, and then eventually becomes private because everyone's so like-minded, and then they have these motivations that they want to pursue maybe outside the club. And if they get together and see eye to eye and kind of plan something up, they can actually play things out outside the club. You have to have secrets to do that. And so everything starts to become this more, clubs do become a like secret holder and a reason that it's like okay to keep secrets. This is my club. And then it's also like you can't come into this club unless you go through the initiation process where we have to test your morals and your motivations. Which from that perspective, it's like that's a huge reason why we have so much corruption, is that you allow clubs and secret societies to exist and do things behind closed doors that you're not allowed to know because it's a club and they're allowed to have the club, you know. And I'm not saying you have to enforce that and regulate that, but I think that's an interesting part of like the foundations of most corrupted societies and governments are built on a secrecy that has
hierarchy.
Yeah, and it's flourished in the secret clubs, you know. What are you laughing at this whole time? She's like, I transposed some word, I guess.
No, it was not you at all. I'm just remembering how much batshit stuff I did in early awakening. Me and my boyfriend were walking down the road, and it's when I was learning the conspiracy version of like the Masons or whatever. This is 20 something years ago. I was maybe like a year and a half into awakening, and we were walking. It's like raining. I think it was pretty late in the evening, and we walked past a Masonic lodge. And it was back when I was taking everything extremely literal. So I just thought everything was like so much more magic and intense.
Oh, I've heard this story. Yeah, this is great.
And so, he was on the same page as me. So we went, I was like, it's time. We need to confront them. You know, this is in the same era where I was like calling corporations and being like, I know
Give me
about the money.
Yeah.
And so we walked in and we were like, hey,
we're here.
And it's just a dude, like it's an Elks Lodge type vibe in there. I don't think any of the people, if there is a secret planning the reality aspect to it, it's very high up. It's not at an Elks Lodge in Southeast
and that's
Portland.
what I think the other thing. A lot of these clubs are not what like the Masons, the Rosicrucians. You go up to the that building in Graham, North Carolina. It's like going to be a bunch of people that are just almost like practicing like
it's like a Rotary Club or something.
Yeah, an outside religion or something.
You know, so the guy is like, yes. We're like, yeah, I mean, what's up? We know. And it was very rare to know, you know, back then. I think these were not wildly spread conspiracy theories back then because the internet didn't foster that back then. We didn't have social media. But just we must have stood there for 10, 15 minutes having the strangest small talk with this guy because we just kept trying to be like, you know, wink. We know
the secrets.
And he's like, sure. And we're like, so like, what do you guys do here? Like, what are you into? And it was all super innocuous stuff. You know, we get together, we have potlucks, we help each other out with stuff. You know, we do like community service or whatever. We're like, and then what? He's like, okay. That's why sometimes I get emails weekly, probably from people who are like, I've been told to contact you. You know what you've been waiting for me. And I'm like, not going to respond to that email, but I feel you, brother. I've been there, dude. I did so much of this shit in early awakening. So yeah, I was transported back to making an ass out of myself in a Masonic lodge once. Yeah, so the Bashar thing is interesting to me. I honestly can't tell. Like, I can't tell what I think about it. I initially was like eye-rolly when I first saw it, more about how people were taking it. People were like either, I knew it, you know. You can't convince me for a second that the aliens wasted their time to say, vote for this candidate because then we'll show up.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, I don't see a fucking reason why that's helpful to humanity at all. And so like, obviously the only people that took it that way were the people that wanted that to be the answer. On the flip side, you know, I just don't resonate that. And I wouldn't resonate with it if he said it on either side, because I don't think the aliens or higher consciousness believes that these two things fucking matter, because they are constructs. We did not have a president of the United States before the cross of planning. You know, each of these games are very different and they have very different constructs, and I just like don't believe in this construct. And so I think it's more than likely, if it wasn't just going through his bias, I think it's more than likely deeply encrypted, and it's not going to make sense until it makes sense, which is how I feel about open contact. We'll see. I'm not like it can't happen, but I, from my current perspective, don't understand what purpose that would serve.
Yeah.
To evolve humanity into like more aware, and you can't get more aware by being obsessed with things outside of you. So
it made me think a lot about it's just so interesting. I loved Bashar stuff for so long, and it was like really helpful. And it's really interesting when you see something like displayed like this. It's kind of in contrast with a lot of the stuff that I was learning before from him, and it's like it made me for a second. I pretty quickly too was like, wait, what? Like, why are you being so biased? This is weird. And I've seen him do that a couple times before on like political issues when people ask. He gives this weird like leaning answer, which again, the social memory complex is like never do that unless they're trying to deceive. And it started to make me, and then I was like, okay, wait, this is a riddle. Like definitely those words are weird. I've already, when I sat with it for 10 minutes, I was like, I could unpack this like 5 different ways and they all come to a different outcome. And so I do resonate that it was like something that was a riddle, and whatever your beliefs are, you're going to get something specific for you out of that. But it also made me go like, well, the more I've learned about, you know, alien abductions and time travel and the way these things have displayed in ancient cultures and the more nefarious side of this stuff, I then all of a sudden started to look at the Bashar material and was like, man, this would actually be a really tactful way for a nefarious group to pull people in to practice and do something a certain way and lead them down a path that ultimately is going to be disempowering at the end.
Yep.
But all along the way feels empowering because it is practices that do enhance your reality, and there's some real stuff to it. But if it's still not ultimately leading to freedom from those teachings and from all of that and autonomy and self-empowerment truly, then it's going to end in another trap. And just for a moment, and I have never come to a conclusion, I don't think Bashar is necessarily a psyop, but there's ways to look at it, and you know, there are some pieces you can put together that like that is a potential, you know. That's how a lot of these religions were built in the beginning. It's like real things. There's a lot of truth in it, and you know, practices of certain ways of, you know, aligning your consciousness that like actually do manifest certain things, and so it feels all positive and magical. But over time, it leads you to being very rigid in thinking and not being open, and very, you know, disempowering in the long run. Could that be what this is? I don't know. I mean, I've definitely come to a conclusion where the alien abduction stuff, this like intervening on people's lives, seems to be very much problematic in every way. Like when we look at stories in the past and like kind of start to peer into this macro chess game that could be going on with other beings that are hyperdimensional and have far more perspective on the reality than we do in this limited field, that the way they play and move those chess pieces is so subtle and very it's like it's all about like kind of playing with that subconscious, and anything that starts to become a thing where they show up and promise something, or they like that aspect of it, even the abduction stuff where they're saying, you know, you're getting, Bashar says people are getting abducted and to create hybrid children. So they're taking specimens from these people and then blending it with these other, you know, quote, alien species to make a hybrid child that is supposed to be helpful for, you know, the advancement of our civilization. And at a certain point, we're going to have open contact with these hybrid children that we may be a part of us that we don't even know. But they're going to be, you know, a level up from what we are, and they're going to help us learn. And all of that stuff sounds really good on one level, but then through this perception of looking at time travelers and alien intervention, like that's not good. It's mostly been very trickery and like a slow thing that's hard to realize when it's happening, but in the end leads again to disempowerment. And so it's hard when you just, you know, dropping all that aside, when you just listen to Bashar's information, I'm like, this is valuable information, and I've felt change from practicing it and learning it, and so there's positives to it. But always being able to discern, well, where there's a lot of good things and positive things, it's almost always not all that. What else could be potential here? Like, could I be being led to believe a certain thing that, is enhancing a certain bias that would be beneficial to someone else?
Yeah, and I don't know if it was this one, but this one really hammered it home. I think it might have been, he did one about Russia that was weird. And I find this thing even in myself where I resonate with something someone says that so many times or during a period of my life that I want that person to be 100% the truth, or the here's the person, like I can even recognize that in myself, that this was just a reminder to me that no one is that, and I try to like encourage people to even engage with stuff I say from that perspective. Like if I start to sound like Charlie Brown's teacher, if I start to put forth ideas that feel that are no longer validating or challenging you in a healthy way, they feel really foreign to your perspective. I really regret the whole colonoscopy thing because it's just resulting in so many phone calls all day, every day. That there comes a point where like someone who's talking into microphones or channeling or whatever, like they're not meant to replace your own internal guidance system. And so this was just a reminder that while that creator like validated things and helped me empower myself in a time where I needed it, like we're not necessarily on the same path, and we're not necessarily sharing the same perspective. And the worst thing we can do is like try to force something that doesn't resonate to resonate. So it really kind of broke the spell. Not that there was an intense spell, but I really hadn't heard him say much that I disagreed with.
Contrary.
And then it was kind of several things back to back. And now I'm looking at him through a more critical lens, and just a reminder to be in my own power, which made me think of a couple different things that I pondered, but maybe while having this person in a little bit of a pedestalized position, which is, it is a business. Like it is what he does for a living. And I don't have anything against people doing spiritual things for a living. I get paid to talk into microphones about consciousness, but he's got a whole machine going, and it is constant. And that's something that's interesting to me, because I guess it's different when you're a channel, but I have found for myself that there are times when I have a lot of like I'm currently in a season of having a lot to say, but I will eventually run out of things to say. Maybe, I don't know. I guess not if things keep changing, but the last few years I had to go inward and kind of grow and change and have my perspective kind of expanded before I had something to share. And so there are just very human aspects of, blowing up and becoming really famous. Like he's been doing this for years, and now almost everyone knows who he is. I think Tim Dillon did a fucking episode on Bashar. Like even normies know who Bashar is now after, working in relative obscurity for decades. He's now on all these podcasts and stuff and whatever. And like, that has an impact on humans. Nobody's perfect, and people have their own stuff. And that's why it's really important that we're not like putting all of our stock or faith into a human, because that is potentially corruptible. That is hijackable. When you're making, I don't know what he's making, but it's a whole ass thing.
Yeah. And I think people can also like fall in and out of frequencies, like maybe in the beginning there was like a real open pureness to the channel. And then as people evolve, and whether the business gets big, how much, shadow work has the Daryl part done, when your reality changes and you start getting a lot more attention, you can kind of, mold and change a bit that then affects the channel too. And so people can evolve, and it can be really great at one point, and then it can kind of evolve into something that just doesn't resonate anymore as deeply. But then the other thing I think is like the splitting of timelines. It's like that he's kind of always saying like people that need to find his message will find it. And if they are listening and it resonates, then like all of those people are on a similar timeline, and the likelihood of the people that really engage having a hybrid child is very high. And but people could resonate with it for a while, and then as we evolve forward, it's like you start to not resonate with it. Does it mean all of that stuff's wrong and not true? Maybe not. Maybe that group of people, and like who Bashar is, he's supposed to be, Daryl Inc. is supposed to be Bashar in the future. Those people are going to that reality, and that's a true thing. It's somewhere, right. And maybe it's not fully autonomous, but maybe it's a level up from this, but it still is kind of, it's just a different timeline than maybe something. If I fall out of resonance with it, it's like, oh, I'm going to a different one than that group of people, and that's why it's seeming so biased and out of line or whatever. But I just think about that too, because he talks about that glass kind of window and timeline shifting. We're jumping on to whatever timeline we resonate with now, and we're moving away from others. That could be the case with this too. It's like, and it doesn't mean they're going to a bad place and I'm going to a good place, or 100%. I'm going to a bad place or they're going to a good place. It's just different. So that could be part of what this is too. But
yeah, I think it could be literally anything, and I don't necessarily think it's this, but you have a human here, let's say he does have like strong political bias. And I don't know how many people listen to Bashar, but a lot. Would you say it's hundreds of thousands now?
Yeah, it's got to be, because it's like all over the world too. I mean, he's huge in Japan.
So imagine, the human knows that there's hundreds of thousands of people listening. It's got to be more than tens of thousands here in the US. The human understands that. I'm not saying this is what this is. I don't feel like this is true, but it's just like, I think we pedestalize, like we dehumanize people when we pedestalize them, because we don't look at like what realistically happens. But let's say the human is dead set bought in. Like the human thinks the other person's going to be a dictator, and we have to avoid that, and that he has a duty to try to help in this situation. And he gets asked the question, that filter of like thinking, but this is the right thing. This is the good thing. And that I'm actually helping humanity. Or maybe he like truly does believe that this will be the good timeline or whatever. It's like, that's so human and understandable and feasible and plausible to happen. And that, that's part of the reason I don't want a huge audience, because that power is corruptible. And what if I get on a kick, and think I'm doing the right thing, but I'm actually just whatever, I'm not saying, I really don't, like, I honestly don't feel like that's consciously happening, at least. But at the level to which people are extremely invested in this right now and truly do believe that their pick is preventing some sort of dictatorship. Like both sides believe the other side is going to be a dictatorship. One believes the dictatorship's going to be perverted. The other believes we're going to the Handmaid's Tale. Like, but they both equally believe that. People who are politically invested, and, go for it if that resonates with you. But if the channel is that level of politically invested, which we don't know, that is going to corrupt the channel. Like,
yeah, 100%. And that Laura Knight Jazik book, she gets so much into the nuance of channeling, kind of the science behind it, which I really appreciated about those books, because she's actually ended up channeling a social memory complex, but was like approaching it scientifically the whole time to try to understand it more. She had done hypnosis a lot. And so she talks a lot about that in a couple of the books, about what she learned through it, and then the corruption she was able to see in other people that were channeling, and how it is so strongly based on the human's filter, their biases, their, how open are they, and ultimately like kind of how skeptical they need to be a good open channel, like kind of always be just trying to discern false information coming through and for what reason. And I think that's a huge element that can happen very subtly if there's a lot of really great information coming through all the time and you start to really trust it. You trust everything they say, then this, like, some of these false things come through and you almost don't even recognize that this could be a bias from the human part of the channel. I need to take this with a grain of salt, and like what really feels true to me, you just take it as truth. But I will say, like, when the Daryl Anka part of that thing, I think he was very behind the scenes for a long time, and he started to come out more publicly in time. And part of it is he says that he's kind of being groomed into transition into the Bashar guy, like that is him in the future, and he's having to try to be more in the public sphere as Daryl and start practicing being every day an open channel in the awake state, not like in a hypnosis with his eyes closed. And so
I really liked that.
Yeah, and I thought that
like it. Yeah.
Yeah. But I will say, like, the couple times, like early on when I started seeing him more, I think I watched a documentary he did, and I've seen a lot of interviews with just Daryl, not Bashar. There are, like, just like every human, I mean, there are biases there.
Right.
He has like a certain stance on art, filmmaking, and he doesn't ever get too political. I think rightfully so. He's smart to not, like, show so much of that. But just in reading people's energy, like I can kind of pick up that, like, he does have kind of a rigid way of thinking. He seems to separate that from his channeling and, like, really does go into an open state. But I think with learning for me through Laura about this, the real subtle art of channeling and just how much it relies on, that human's consciousness and what their daily lives are and their practice, their perceptions of the world, like that's what it's coming through. And so I think this could be maybe the first display that's like public of that potentially being the effect of this statement through him. It potentially was a bit biased through the humans.
Like he's starting to meld more with Bashar.
Yeah, and he's practicing it. But this is one where it's like maybe he's a little short-sighted on giving a statement that is truly like outside of picking a side, picking which one's better in this like wrestling match. I mean, it's like so much of the rest of his teaching should understand that this is just pawns being moved around. Like the change is going to come from within inside you. Who cares which one of these wins? Yes, it's going to have an effect on your reality, but if you're doing your own inner work, it's not going to really, you're going to be able to traverse it. Some kind of answer like that would have been a more macro STO social memory complex answer to somebody asking, what is this election going to do for humanity?
Yeah.
But he answered like pretty straightforward with some pretty obvious bias, unless you take it as a riddle. And I think that's very much a possibility of it too.
I kind of love that it's both. Like It seems off the top biased, and it was funny to, like, not funny, but interesting to watch people engage with it, either by going, yes, I knew it, or getting really triggered by it. And then other people going, I think it's a riddle. Like, and the part of me that really likes Bashar and has gotten a lot from Bashar's work. And then when I've seen Daryl Anka talk, I like him as a person, And so there is a part of me that wants to go, like, do some you know, like gymnastics to make it fit into whatever. Yeah. And, you know, that's all just interesting to observe, and our desire to pedestalize people, to see them as not having bias. We're like, we all have bias. Like you and I, this whole podcast is like from our personal bias, right? And it just, he's there to be a source of information, to take what resonates and leave the rest. He's not your daddy, you know? And that's what I got like in that moment, where it wasn't that one, it was a different one, but I went, ugh. And it's like just a friendly reminder that he's not your daddy. Yeah, totally. He is not your source of information. And I wouldn't put it past Bashar to do things like this every once in a while, to just shake things up and remind people to check in with themselves. So I don't know. I can't energetically read it for some reason. And I think that is because I do have some emotional investment maybe. And then also it feels like maybe it's not supposed to be read. Like it was something that was intentionally meant to not have one solid answer. Maybe I don't want to commit to an answer of what it was. I don't know. But I fucking love that we have this podcast and that we're doing this, because this is my dream, is to be able to talk into microphones and say, I have no idea. Here's my thoughts on this side. Here's my thoughts on this side, which is much more realistic to my reality. And I'm sitting here, like, besides the fact that I have to pee really bad, completely calm, having this conversation, feeling no obligation to be right. And that's not a freedom I had most of my life. I think the cross of planning energy really insisted that you better bring facts and you better know what the fuck you're talking about. And as someone who likes to philosophize and ponder and contemplate and play with this perception, and then play with this perception, and play with this perception, and as someone whose brain does not retain facts, like I jumble up dates. I'm very like ChatGPT. I jumble up dates. I mix things together. I love that we're moving into a place where we're just like, let's spend an hour talking about all the possibilities of what this meant and not committing to any of them.
Yeah.
Not needing to have a take, you know, not needing to be right, and being okay with, like, if there is open contact, then I'll be like, oh shit, yep, didn't see that coming. Like, interesting, you know, because that's actually who I am behind closed doors. But I didn't feel safe ever doing that on a microphone, you know. I mean, I feel like the culture around podcasting was like, you know, you put out an episode and then everybody like criticizes and fact checks. It was like some people made a whole life and living out of fact checking Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Because I guess they are just kind of like an expert comes on and then they just kind of ponder things. But then there was a lot of pressure to pull things up and check and see if they're fact or whatever, you know.
Yeah, because there's so many people listening and they're taking it as full
a deep
truth.
Responsibility. Yeah. Once again, the glory of not having a massive following. Yeah. But I just, this sort of shit, and I've said this before, like when you're listening to episodes, like you're listening to podcasts, the thing that's off-putting to me is all the certainty.
Yeah.
Like everyone
I mean, I listen to a lot of people like that, and it's always a red flag, but I still like listening to a lot of different things, even if somebody's up their own ass and so sure, because I can discern for me whether it's not, I'm not like trusting somebody else over my own instincts. And so I think that's what we all have to learn, is like just listening to people. We can not like some of the stuff they're saying. It doesn't mean everything they say is false. But it's tough when there is this desire like to know the one and only truth, the ultimate truth, and not be duped by any of the false stuff. We're trying to find like a perfect person that has all their bases covered.
Yeah.
It's pretty impossible though.
Yeah, I guess you reach a point of conscious awareness where it's like, yeah, sure, who knows? That's it. That's like, yep, I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, it's liberating to be like that. I mean, God, like, I mean, especially around like big pivotal moments like this within politics, everybody's so amped up. And even if I start watching it too much online, I will get like, yeah, fuck you and fuck them. But then I, come back and I'm like, I really actually don't care. And it's fun to be in that place, not truly invested, but trusting and just like observing that like wherever we land, we're supposed to land and like we can get through it. It is liberating to just kind of be like, yeah, I don't know, who cares? We'll see when we get there,
Yeah. Or is there going to be open contact? Yeah, I don't know.
I definitely know I'm going to be checking the aliens' IDs if they come up here, and like I got to know where you're coming from. What's your past record? Like, you ain't going to trick me with some fucking promises of, going to the Pleiades where it's a utopic thing. I don't know, whatever kind of tricks.
Yeah, they're like, okay, so all you got to do is upload your consciousness and then you'll be in the Pleiades.
Yeah, there's too many tricks have been pulled for sure.
I forgot about this, but do you remember the day that I think Facebook changed their name to Meta? I had that nightmare where we were all, and I guess like we had just someone bought you an Oculus, and so we'd been playing with that a little bit. And I had that dream where everyone got really addicted to virtual reality, and you could have everything that you never got to have in life, and it was super immersive and it felt super real. And so I was in it, but I wasn't me, if that makes sense, And all my friends were there, and we were all living our best life, and it was super free and open, and you could do whatever you wanted. And then at some point it got monetized. I really need to write these dreams down, the ones that feel significant. At some point it got monetized, and you start getting asked, do you want to upload your consciousness to the service or whatever? Oh, it didn't get monetized. It just was asking that. Do you want to upload your consciousness to the server? And I kept saying no. And then all my friends started doing it. And they were like, oh my God, it's so great. You got to do it, whatever. And so I finally said yes. And these blades came out of the side of the headset. And so I was physically dead after that. And then immediately my favorite things in the game were grayed out, and I had to work to earn them. And I can't remember if we had already watched that one show that has some of those aspects of
Upload.
I can't remember if we had watched that already or not. This was years ago, but it was like a horrific feeling. And it was also not the first time I had felt that. On a soul level, there was a moment where things were grayed out. And then also like my friends who were telling me to upload my consciousness because it's great were also living in a grayed out reality. And so I don't know who I was actually interacting with telling me to do that. I don't know if that was holograms of my friends or what, but we were in hell, and we could, like, our bodies were dead. And so we had just basically like uploaded our consciousness to an alternate realm under the premise of like, this is so much easier. This is so much more fun. Oh, and there was also something where like life had gotten like difficult in the physical reality. So a lot of us were on there because, the weather or something like, so it felt extremely real. It felt prophetic. And it felt like a loop that my soul had been on many times. But also I wasn't me. Like I wasn't Jessa Reed in the dream. I think I was a man, actually. I can't remember. I wish I'd written it down. I talked about it somewhere, but who knows? Like an ancient Patreon episode. It's one of those dreams that stuck with me for days. Like it takes a while to realize like, okay, that didn't really happen.
Yeah.
And it made me extremely skeptical of technology for a long time afterwards. And so I am not going to like leap headlong into corporate tech, obviously. I would never upload my consciousness to anything corporate, you know? But it did feel like a message about the obsession with comfort, or the obsession with, you know, because you got to be beautiful. You got to have the body you always wanted. You got to have all of the like comforts that you ever wanted. Oh, that was the other thing, is you could physically feel everything. Like it was a full body thing. So if you were having sex, you could feel the sex. If you were eating good food, you could feel the food, which is so funny to me because we are kind of creating that. And it's like, have you considered just living life?
Yeah.
But it felt, looking back now through the lens of like disempowerment, empowerment, it did feel like a bypass. Like, oh, this is just easier. You know, this is just easier than figuring out how to live in the evolving world. This is just easier than taking responsibility for the food I eat so that I have like more energy. This is easier than dealing with whatever the physical world is trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's the weak part of like the human experience right now, is our obsession because of so much pain and struggle. It's so difficult. We've gotten obsessed with comfort and ease, the easy way to things, that I think that's a super hijackable desire.
Right.
Know, especially with technological advancement of things. It's like, that feels, I mean, I didn't have that dream, but that feels very like, I can almost touch that feeling with something that maybe that's happened before. Or just even, I think, in our own lives, when you experience like somebody promises you something, and you agree to some things and it turns out to not be quite what they said it was, and the kind of the trickery that can go there, where you can dangle a carrot of promise and based on something that, you know, someone's experiencing, they're lacking, you're like, promise them, oh, I will give you this and I'll make you feel great. To get you to, you know, pretty quickly agree to do some things. And then it, you know, in the long run, it doesn't turn out well. That feels like what's going to be, we're kind of in a way collectively being groomed into a scenario where they can easily open the door to some place of and have great promises that don't turn out in the long run, you know?
Yeah, because I do think we're coming out of an age of struggle. And I don't think that, you know, that's the entirety of the experience. Like, I do believe that we're moving towards something that is actually about comfort and ease, authentic comfort and ease, as in we're not shadow boxing things we can't change, right. And we're not struggling for the sake to struggle, and we're not seeking out partners who aren't capable of monogamy so that we can play out our abandonment wound on them. You know, that we are moving to a level of consciousness that offers comfort and ease. I think the allegory of the uploading your consciousness to meta is someone outside of you is promising comfort and ease without you having to take responsibility for your own experience.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it was like, now through that lens, a few years later, it was much more about like escapism rather than playing this game through. It's just like, yeah, take me to where it's fucking easy and it's a trap. And the way that I didn't know uploading my consciousness was going to mean blades into my temple and the end of my physical reality. And so that felt like a trick. And it was like a door slammed behind me, and that felt like a trick. And then that, like, oh shit. And then everything was grayed out, and it was like, sorry, you can't afford, you have to, which that part might've been from the upload show, but it was like, now you're back in capitalism, you know, because the path out of, and late stage capitalism, the path out of that is not, give us a leader to come fix this. I mean, it could literally just be an allegory for that, right? Give us a leader to fix these things. And it's like, no, we all have to internally fix them within ourselves.
Yeah. And that's what I'm pointing to, is like, that's where we're at right now, is like we're gotten to a point where the easier route is just, oh, I can vote for somebody and they'll fix it all. No problem. I'll do that. It's very difficult to take responsibility of everything that's fucking happening right now. in your own life that you don't like or want, it's like, that's so hard, man. I mean, that's where that real self-work is. But if you can offer some other kind of somebody else or something that I can do to make it all go away and fix it, I mean, 90% of the world right now would say, yes, I could do that. Yeah.
Yeah. The truth is, utopia is an experience that individuals have when they have taken responsibility for their own personal reality and their own personal perceptions, and healing all of the subconscious programs that get sucked into their algorithm and get reflected back to them. And it's low and it's slow and it takes a lifetime. Like I'm saying, like, I only get to have this magical love with you. I mean, you're great, but you're only in my life. Like, I only attracted someone like you because I spent decades facing my own shit and taking responsibility, not always taking responsibility, but eventually taking responsibility and healing my shit. And so then I got to have a relationship with someone like you that I would have like not even attracted into my life at one point, and I would have like ruined it at one point in my life because until I took responsibility for my own shit. And so the way that my life is firing on all cylinders and my life is beautiful and all these things that are beautiful in my life are the direct result of taking responsibility for everything that's ever happened in my life. Not blame, fault, who gives a shit about that, but like, if I don't like this, what can I heal inside of myself to have a different experience? Like, where am I addicted? Like, I was extremely trauma addicted in my life. Like, I sought out dramatic experiences. I sought out, people and places and things that would provide me with very dramatic, painful experiences. And so I had to heal that within myself and cultivate and not let people in my life who act like that and not engage in things like that in order to get to the way that life is right now. And that's not been easy, and it sure as fuck hasn't been fast. I mean, I'm in my late 40s now, but that is how I have reached, for me personally. Many people wouldn't consider my life utopic for them, but that's how I've reached my own personal thing. Nobody outside of me can provide me with that. Sure as fuck, no leader who's never met me and doesn't give two shits about me as an individual is going to be able to do that. But this age of Sleeping Phoenix, I believe, is like where each individual learns that is an individual thing.
Yeah.
And so I think we're all going to engage with that age differently. We're all like, for many of us, it will be empowering. For many others, it will be about falling for scams and cults and charismatic leaders and giving your power to them and then getting betrayed. I think that is a story we're already seeing playing out a lot, and we will continue to see like played out a lot. Do you have to pee really bad?
Yes.
Okay. You get really quiet.
Well, I'm also just like, I think I'm at the end of
We're
my
done.
brain focus.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sure. Whatever.
Yeah.
That's the name of this episode.
Sure, whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Whatever.
Oh, that's the name?
I think so.
Sure.
Because I think that's a level of consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Maybe. I guess. Whatever. All right. Mark does sessions. You know the drill. Mark does sessions. He has a Patreon. I am not doing sessions for a while. I have a Patreon though.
Mine's free. Hers is not.
Yep. Love you. Bye.
Bye.